Hi everyone, I'm back. I am one of the New South Wales mobilizers, and we are trying to get um, Meet the Missionary up and running for New South Wales because it's something that New Zealand has been doing and it's been great over there. So we're hoping that this can be something that we do about 4 or 5 times a year in the future. And so today we are chatting with Christine, who served for 22 years in Taiwan. Can you please introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your family background?
Yes, so my name is Christine Dillon. I am Australian, but at 2 months old, I went to Asia because my parents were OMF missionaries. Mum started in the Philippines, married my dad, and moved to Taiwan. So I spent most of my childhood in Asia till I was 17. I went to primary school in Malaysia at the OMF school that has now closed, called Chifu. And then I went to Faith Academy, which is still open in the Philippines, which is an all missions school. Um, and yes, I came back to Australia when I was 17 and spent 12 years becoming an Australian, university and as a physiotherapist and working for a couple of years, but always knowing that I wanted to go back overseas. And then I went to Sydney Missionary and Bible College in Sydney, obviously, and then back overseas in 1999 to serve with OMF.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask, so how did you become a Christian?
Very simply, and I used to be very embarrassed of my testimony, but now I really love that it was so simple. So the primary school I went to in Malaysia was an OMF school, and we had fantastic Bible teaching there. My parents would also have done family devotions from when I was 2 years old, or younger. And one holidays I went home and we had 4 months at school and 2 months home. And the first couple of weeks of every holiday, I was angelically good. And then my behavior would deteriorate and I'd fight a lot with my sister. So by about week 6, I was feeling miserable. And I was doing the dishes with my mum, and she said, "Does your heart feel like this dirty plate?" And I said, "Mm-hmm." And she put it in the water, washed it clean, and said, "Jesus can wash you clean. Would you like that?" So I became a Christian at the kitchen sink as a 7-year-old.
What led you to become a missionary?
Well, ever since I was very little, and definitely from the age of 14, I wanted to be a missionary. And I think for me, it was that Australians had more opportunities to hear about Jesus, and there were so many people that had less. So for me, it was just simple mathematics and probabilities. Um, so from the age of 14, I had already chosen the Bible college, I planned to do 4 years university, 3 years work, 2 years Bible college, and I basically stuck to that. Um, so it was just very clear to me. It wasn't clear necessarily which country, and in fact, I spent 14 years preparing to go to Thailand, and I joke that God misheard and heard Taiwan and sent me there instead. Yeah, I actually got refused twice for going to Thailand with OMF. Um, and it wasn't always OMF either. I was willing to go with any organization. And at one point, I was considering pioneers in Indonesia. Um, and I nearly got married at Bible college and we would have gone to South Africa. So, it would have been a very different journey for me if that had happened. Yeah.
How did you pick the Bible college?
That was pretty easy. The in Sydney, there are three big ones. I really wanted interdenominational. I really wanted my aunt had been to SMBC. My mother had been to the Baptist College. My father had been to the Baptist College. So there was probably a pull towards that. And when I decided to go to Bible college, I had actually wanted to stick to the 2 years full time. And then God gave me a part-time job rather than full time. So I did 2 years part-time at the Baptist College because it was closer to home, but always intending to go to SMBC for the 2 years full time. And because it's part of the Australian College of Theology, now the Australian University of Theology from this year, you can actually go and do subjects at different colleges. So the Melbourne School of Theology and even the Bible College in New Zealand, I think, is in that. Hmm.
Mm. What did the path look like in terms of ending up in Taiwan? You said, you were looking at South Africa and then looking at Thailand. How did you know Taiwan was where God was leading you?
So I was expecting to get married in August of my final year at Bible College. When that fell through, I got very good advice from the general director of OMF, who I knew personally. Their daughter was a best friend when I was in primary school. They said, don't make you, because you've just come out of a relationship, don't make your decision quickly. Take your time. And they gave me a list of organizations to check out. So I did my homework and I checked out the different organizations. But eventually, after about 6 months, I came back to OMF and I thought, no, I really think that God wants me in East Asia. I've had experience there. I think that's where I fit. And I worked out that I didn't fit in France and Spain, which I had a burden for because I don't like coffee or wine. I just was never going to fit the cafe culture. It just wasn't me. And I also worked out I was never going to fit South America because I'm too structured and efficient and organized. And I would have been frustrated by the relaxed nature of things. So, sometimes it's got to do with your personality too and your background. So you're not going to suddenly miraculously become a totally different person. So if you're totally relaxed, you're never going to suddenly become Japanese in your timekeeping or Swiss. Yeah, unlikely.
So once you'd figured out, okay, Taiwan is where God is having you serve, what did the preparation process look like leading up to actually ending up there?
I think I might expand a little bit on why Thailand. For
Yep.
me, the reason, because we've got someone doing a short term in Thailand, the reason for me to go to Thailand was it's a lower percentage of Christians in Thailand, more unreached, with a higher population than Taiwan. So to me, that was the place to go. I applied, I got refused, and the original refusal was completely crazy. It was because I was single. Um, and then OMF said, a couple of the OMFers on this end said, you're crazy. Don't refuse Christine. She'll be an asset to you. And so they put a bit of pressure on the Thailand home side. And they said, well, we'll consider it again. We'll pray about it. And I prayed and I said, God, if you don't want me in Thailand, tell them to make them say no, even if they don't know why. And I got this really embarrassed email, and they said, look, we're refusing you. We've discussed it, we've prayed about it, we're refusing you, and we don't know why. And I thought, okay, God got the message. And I got a really warm welcome from the Philippines and Taiwan. And in the end, I thought I'll go to Taiwan for various reasons. There are various reasons I didn't want to go to Taiwan. One, my parents had been there, and my dad was really well known, and I didn't want to be compared with him my whole life. And two, I don't really like cities and pollution, and I knew I was going to have that. Um, but in the end, God helped me to cope with the pollution, and having my parents having been a second generation in the same country actually was a huge asset because it meant sometimes people trusted me more than they would a new person because they trusted my parents. Yeah. But I wasn't really happy about it. And actually it took probably almost 10 years before I was really convinced that Taiwan was the place for me. So, it's not all love and joy and whatever. Sometimes it's obedience too.
So what was your experience in adjusting to living in Taiwan? So, with culture, with language, both good things and bad things. What
Yeah.
was it like?
It's really hard at the beginning. I had a bit of an advantage because at least I'd heard Chinese, but really I had very little. I could count to 10. I could ask I had a couple of phrases. That was it. It was pretty low level. It's really hard because one of the hardest things for me is I'm highly literate. I'm the kind of person that if there's a milk bottle or a cereal packet at the table, I read it. being illiterate was terrible. But what it did is it spurred me on to really start working on characters so that I could read. It's pretty annoying when the only way you can identify the post office at the beginning is because it's got green and white signs. Um, and learning language is a long tunnel. It feels very frustrating. And I am not a really emotional person, but with language learning, I'd be sort of ready to go on Monday, and by Wednesday I was in a deep slump, and oh, at least the weekend's coming. So it was very much like this. It just was hard going. But I did know there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and if I persevered, I'd get there. And you do. No one, I don't know of anyone that's failed because of language. They fail for other reasons. And no, you get the language eventually.
What were the biggest culture shocks for you?
I don't know if they were culture. I found the pollution hard. I found the traffic and the way the traffic really reveals just a basic selfishness. The parking, and it was really dangerous to cycle around. You just had to learn to adjust. Um, and at the beginning, what happens is that you're always comparing. You just can't help yourself. You're comparing to home. The rubbish is not as convenient, or it's more convenient. And culture shock is really a comparison game, usually with the culture that you're trying to adjust to coming off negatively. So it's just a process to go through it. Um, and you do adjust. I did find it very difficult, the bluntness about personal things. You had a pimple, they said, "What's that?" Things like that I found quite difficult. And always being called a foreigner, that was difficult too. The children are saying foreigner, foreigner, foreigner. Yeah.
Do you have any tips on language and culture learning and adjusting?
Mostly pray and persevere. I mean, the good thing about language is that it actually is like sandpaper, and so it's actually molding you to be more like Christ if you just keep persevering and trusting Him. Um, it's hard going, but you get there. Um, and language study is a sort of a tunnel that actually puts you under pressure and it shows what's really there. So it's a good sign of what really pushes your character, I think, because Satan gets in and he gets you're either proud because you're doing better than someone else, or you're in despair because they're doing better than you. So it pushes on a lot of those things that you really need to sort out. What makes you a success, and what is your effort, and what is actually God-given ability, and all sorts of things. So I almost, I think it's sad sometimes that people go to a country they already speak the language. I think it's always worthwhile learning another language because that refining. There's a good question. How long did it take you to feel comfortable sharing the gospel and discussing the Bible in Chinese? Okay. Um, One of the reasons that the first term that OMF does of service is 4 years is because they want you to reach the 3.5 year point. So about then is when you're really beginning to make progress. So they leave you there long enough so that you want to come back after your home assignment. If we had, a lot of agencies have very short terms, 2 years, 2.5 years. It's too short. It's too short for Asia. I would never have probably come back. I think the 4 years just pushes you to actually reach that stage where you're beginning to make friends and you actually want to come back. Um, how did I find ways of getting ideas across effectively in a different culture? Um, I learned to do sort of acting. I be very simple in my explanations, use daily life illustrations that they would understand. Um, when we were doing language school and we did proverbs, I wrote down all the proverbs and learned the ones that actually had gospel application. Um, yeah, and I used those because that made them think that you'd made an effort, but it also allowed you to explain the gospel. Yeah. And there's lots of really great proverbs that help with that. Hmm. And listening to illustrations and things from just the news and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. Okay, Rebecca.
What did a day in the life of your ministry look like? Kind of an average day for you.
So the first 2 years was language study. Third and fourth year, I was based in a church, a Baptist church, learning to do the things I could do in English, leading Bible studies, doing evangelism, whatever, but in Chinese. So it was just, there was never a day in the life of, it was a week in the life of, but a mixture of prayer, language school, talking to people, doing formal things like leading a Bible study. Once I moved into a church planting role, it was much more out on the street, getting to know people, following your interests and hobbies so that you've got natural connections with people. So if you like playing badminton, you go and make friends with badminton players. If you want to do Chinese calligraphy, that's where you learn your friends. So it's just learning to see who God's made you and begin to make connections that way. And then I did more and more Bible storytelling as time went on. So I would have people that I knew I was up to story 3 or up to story 4, and I'd try and um, go to them at a similar time. I worked out their timetable and fit in with them. Yeah. And team meetings and OMF meetings and praying for each other. I mean, prayer needs to be a good part of it. And I always considered prayer work, so that you don't feel guilty doing it. And there was, when I started in the last place that I worked, I used to do I think I did a half day of prayer a week, and that was my work. And then I did prayer out on the street, walking the town and praying as I went, just to try and get out there, which is the hard thing. It's really hard because most of our workers are introverts, and we just have to choose to be out with non-Christians. Yeah.
When you were talking with people that you met, how would you normally introduce yourself? Like, what was the starting point for then building that relationship?
Well, because I was white, they would naturally ask, where are you from and what are you doing here? Now, if you're Asian background working in Asia, they're not going to ask that question, but they will ask other questions. So it might be, why do you live in this town or whatever? And you've got to learn how to answer that question so that it gets you somewhere towards the gospel. So it could be, I work in this town because there aren't many people that know Jesus here, and I want to introduce people to Jesus, or whatever it is. Um, and I went at different speed. Every person's different. So some people, they start asking questions and it leads you to an opportunity in your first conversation. Other people, you might know them for a year before you get an opportunity to talk about Jesus. Yeah. But I think the skill was learning how to answer questions that is always opening up the possibility of it leading to the gospel. And that's an evangelistic skill that takes time. Yeah. I mean,
I've
we
got
got
a,
fun questions. Like, I tell you a question that you had to get to the gospel from. You get asked, what's your salary? So, in Australia, you don't talk about things like this, but it's quite a direct thing. And it's actually there where we say, what do you do? And that, are they higher status than me or lower status, and likely higher salary or lower? But they just ask, what's your rent or what do you earn? And, I tell them what I'd earn. And they said, I was called a liar. Because no foreigner would, I'd say, why are you calling me a liar? They said no foreigner would work for that amount of money. And I say, well, can you think of anything that might be more important than money? And they couldn't. So then I had my gospel opportunity. Yeah.
Got another question in the chat. So, how did you choose your team and ministry out of all the OMF teams ministries across Taiwan?
So in Taiwan, what we do is while you're at language school, you actually go on visits and you visit all different. So you would narrow it down. You might say there are 5 places that are possibilities that I would be interested in, and you've heard about them at the field conference and other things, and you read the monthly prayer bulletin. So you have a vague idea. You're praying. You've narrowed it down to say 4 places, and then you do ministry visits for a week each, or a couple of days. They're much shorter than they used to be. And you pray, and then there's a field council that's sort of the decision-making body, and it's a mixture of praying, you thinking, discussion with OMF, and discussion with the team. That's how we do it in Taiwan. Yeah. They're just basically trying to match you to the right match for you to get the maximum experience that you need in your third after language school. And then after that, it gets much more, who do you get along with kind of thing. Yeah. Or whose vision are you excited about? Yeah.
So, you served in Taiwan for 22 years. Did your ministry change much over that time? Or was it rather like stable and looked very similar?
Um, Mine was relatively stable. I mean, the third and fourth year, I worked in a Baptist church, like an apprenticeship, just to get a feel for Taiwanese churches. And then I went on a church planting team for 4 years. And then I started a church planting team for 12 years. So 3 sort of different things. Um, the ministry on the ground in Taiwan stayed the same, but I got more and more extra things outside Taiwan. So I ended up, I was training OMFers in evangelism and discipleship. That just a lot of reasons, but that really was sort of how God had gifted me. Um, I was involved with short-term teams coming. Um, Early on, I started writing books. So these are things that I didn't expect, but ended up part of it. So God gifts us in different ways. And I just think of Aaron Coe, who's in Taiwan. He's gifted in video and that kind of thing and technology. So he's involved making mobilization videos. He's very gifted at mobilization. I think he's involved now with a podcast. It depends on what your spiritual gifts are. If you were an artist or a musician, you might end up training musicians to write songs for the Taiwanese church. I mean, who knows what you might end up doing? Or starting a disability ministry. There's so many things, or you're brilliant at Sunday school training. So it just depends what you're good at. Janice has got a question there. How does OMF choose or find new areas or people groups and ministries to work with? It's mostly through a mixture of prayer and research, I think. Um, and sometimes it just happens because someone's got an interest or God's led them into an area and then it just sort of develops from there. So it's a whole, but prayer is with everything, prayer and discussion. Yeah. Um, okay, here's a good question from Greg. What are some of the key things about being a missionary people should consider before going? I think you have to be a flexible kind of person who's willing to be a constant learner. And you have to be able to cope with things constantly changing. If you are an absolute homebody and you can't imagine anything worse than leaving where you are, then possibly this is not for you, but you'd be great supporting someone. So I think you have to be flexible. And you also have to be humble because you're going to make an awful lot of mistakes. Um, and you need to work on your listening to other people, and not assuming that you already know everything. Um, Difficult. There are lots of difficult aspects. I'm single, which we haven't mentioned so far, but um, leaving family is very hard. Being away for all the things that happen in families. So, I have 10 nephews and nieces who I adore being around. So just missing out on a lot of that. That I found hard. I found the pollution really hard. Where I lived in my last town, there was a year, I think maybe very early on, where I saw the mountains from my window 3 times in a year. They were actually fabulously beautiful mountains. And when it was a beautiful day, you'd think, oh, I could easily stay here. But, when it was just grey and almost like a fog, smoggy thing, it was horrible. So I learned to, instead of looking at the horizon, I learned to look at a hibiscus plant, small in front of me. So you just got to learn how to cope. And I got lots of exercise and that helped me cope with things. So that's sort of how you've got to work around. But at the other end of it, it's tremendously exciting being out of your comfort zone and learning from God all the time. And I wouldn't have exchanged it for anything. Yeah. Okay, the reasons missionaries fail. Um, Pride might be a reason that a missionaries fail. Um, thinking you're better than others and you know it all. I think it's a danger when you come from a good theological college. Sometimes you think, wow, this is the best college in the world, and we have the truth. And I it's particularly bad for Sydney. I think we're particularly bad at this. Um, Failed relationships, so conflict between missionaries, which happens quite a lot for many reasons. One of the reasons is simply that Satan wants you to have conflict with your colleagues because that's absolutely miserable. Um, and so it's very easy when life is really, you're in conflict to just leave. So running too soon. My principle is you always work through it if you possibly can, and you only make a decision to leave after you've worked through it. So there are sort of principles that I follow. Um, Moral failure. We have had quite a few. And that's one of the things you've got to work at, that you're not going to be one of those statistics, and put boundaries in place so that you don't end up in moral failure, affairs and things like that. Dreadful. Sickness. I mean, it's not necessarily failure that you leave. Could be sickness. And I'm home because of my parents needed me. Mum died very suddenly a year ago, and I'm now caring for my dad. So I'm stuck here until he goes to glory. I would prefer to be in Taiwan because I think it's easier I mean, because I'm an evangelist, I want to be with non-Christians. So it's quite hard for me to be in the OMF office. But there's some really great things about that too. Yeah. You got another question, Rebecca? We're getting good. This is a great conversation.
Mm. Kind of continuing on from that, my next question was going to be like, what were helpful strategies to longevity in the field to have, particularly things that you might be able to start developing prior to the field, but also habits on the field?
Yeah. There are no shortcuts to prayer and Bible study. Absolutely no shortcuts. And you're not going to miraculously get better at them because you're a missionary. And I think most of us are stronger on one or the other. I used to be have no problem doing Bible reading and really struggle with prayer. Now it's reversed. It's a lot harder for me to be regular with the Bible reading. I think it's because I've been a Christian so long that it's not new. So one of the things that's been really fantastic is I'm writing Old Testament fiction now, and that is a different way of doing Bible study, and that's been really helpful. Bible storytelling has been brilliant for me because I have to learn a story really well and practice it over and over and over. And so that's a form of meditation on scripture. And I use the PrayerMate app, and I've learned that I pray much better walking. So I go out walking with my PrayerMate app, which has lists and they give you random number of points per day. I love that. That's a use of technology that I approve of. Um, yeah, so I'm a slow technology adopter. I'm really passionate about that we want people to be joyful in service. And so that involves learning to rest. And I'm still struggling with it. You'd think that after all these years of practice, I'd be great at it. But a rest habit, uh, learning what helps you to relax, whether it's sewing or quilting or chess or um, growing African violets or gardening, whatever it is, you learn to art or photography, you just learn that you've got to do that. Um, so I've recently learned that for me, bird watching in Australia is brilliant. And I go away on a 3-day weekend with a bird club, and it combines walking, photography, and bird watching. So that's a good combination for me. And the other thing I'm really passionate about is that you really must have at least 3 times a week of exercise. The more exercise you're getting, really, the better for everything. So really be fit and healthy. Yeah. Why did I start trying storytelling? Well, again, I was slow to adopt it. So we had a training, and this is, you haven't asked me, Rebecca, but I will tell you. What are some of the strengths of OMF? Well, one of them that I'm very passionate about, and it developed after I became a missionary, is our training and development department. And we have a whole bunch of training courses that everyone can go to it, or that we sometimes we host them on the field and everyone can go. They're brilliant in many things, just the quality of the course. So there's leadership courses, there's evangelism courses, there's how do you share with supporters at home courses. And we had a missionary come across and do storytelling with us. And I just thought, it's just not me. I'm not going to be good at it. I'm too busy, lots of excuses. But God just basically forced me to do it. And I still thought, even when he forced me, oh, I'll do it. It'll be terrible. I'll flop. But it wasn't like that at all. So I've been doing storytelling for 21 years now. And yeah, it's fabulous. And I wouldn't change it for anything. Mm, financial partnership. Yes, different expectations that supporters have, and how do you manage it? Financial partnership. That's another thing I love about OMF. I love OMF's financial policy. I love being in an organization that does not send letters in June and say, we're way down. It's the end of the financial year. We need $3 million by next week. I love that, not being a part of it. I love being in an organization where they pray it in. We have a support figure and you've got to pray it in. It's really stretching to your faith, and that we can't just directly say, give me $1,000. I love that because it's very easy to manipulate people. Different expectations supporters have. Don't think they were financial. I did have a very awkward experience with someone that they used to support me quite well financially, and they also ran my monthly prayer meeting on this end. And he just became convinced that I was wasting my life in Taiwan and I should have gone somewhere that was much more fruitful. And he also said I shouldn't have learned a second language because I did Mandarin and Taiwanese because I'd never be any good at two. And so he used financial manipulation to try and, in fact, he actually rang the national director and abused him for the choices that, Christine Dillon shouldn't be doing this or that. And he withdrew all financial support and stopped leading the prayer meeting and hosting the prayer meeting. So it was a really nasty manipulation. So that wasn't much fun. Um, and I've had other people. One of the prayer partners, the first letter he wrote to me is, "Be aware of your place as a woman." Now, what did he mean by that? I think what he meant that I shouldn't be doing any training or speaking, and I just thought, well, I don't think that that's what God's saying to me. So anyway, so you can get, and especially if you're a woman, and especially if you're a single woman, you can get people's theological expectations on you too. So that's great fun. I mean, Satan will always use Christians to really discourage you, and it's much worse coming from Christians. So that was really discouraging, that guy that stopped supporting me financially. And it was also just as I was about to speak at a very major event. Um, and the timing, I don't think, was an accident, not from his point of view, but from the enemy's point of view. Yeah. Yeah.
What are the biggest needs in Taiwan and in the mission field in general?
Yeah. I'm just mission field in general. Mission field in general is just there are vast people groups or areas of the world that are very low in Christians. Um, France and Spain, these traditionally Christian places that are as secular or as Roman Catholic or Orthodox as you can imagine. So vast sections of Europe desperately needing revival. Muslim world, very much. Central Asia, our East Asian area, there's vast numbers of places that are very needy. I think they said we've got 60 visa spots available for Thailand that are not being used. Thailand is vast mission field. It's more than 60 million people. It's less than 1% Christian. It really needs workers. Um, Vietnam, Indonesia, just huge numbers of areas that just have huge needs, or within a society too, people that are not really accessible, taxi drivers, people in prison, um, working class people in general, just so many. I mean, real intellectuals, business people. There's so many people that are just not meeting Jesus because no one's going to them. So what was the first part of that question? Oh, the needs in Taiwan. Again, it's still working class. I would regularly meet people that had heard of Adam and Eve, but that was it, the names. They didn't know what an Abraham was or a Moses. They didn't know any of the stories. No idea. They thought Santa Claus was the Christian God. And you can see why they think that when you look at some of the decorations at Christmas. Yeah. Mm. And we can use virtually anyone. So there's a lady at the moment who's very young. She's a horse trainer. So the minute she said horse training, I said the one place I can think of that would be really valuable would be Mongolia. We've got nomadic people who are passionate about horses. There's a lady who I couldn't do horse training, and I couldn't do nomadic Mongolians, but she can. So, each one of us has niche things that we're particularly good at. Yeah. Oh, Jenny, you must be about to go overseas. She's asking lots of these, really. Really good practical questions. Looking back, would you have done anything differently? Hmm. Ah, yes, I probably would have listened more and been more humble at the beginning.
You mean to everyone or anyone in particular?
I think it just takes time for God to humble you enough so that
Mm,
you're useful.
mm.
Um, I don't know. Um, I'm sure there were lots and lots of things I would have done differently. Um, I certainly would have liked to have started storytelling earlier. And I remember my coworker had been in Taiwan 20 years when he started storytelling, and he said, I feel like I wasted the first 20 years in communicating because this is so much better. So that's one thing. So that's why I get really excited when I can train teenagers and people that are younger and they can go in with this tool. Yeah.
I have a question. Um, so I'm just thinking through because we're about to send a family overseas, as you know. And I think one of the conversations we were having, kind of touching on what Greg said before about the different expectations from supporters. So I guess from your perspective, when you do get that feedback from people, how can your home church or your support team, what sort of um, praying, of course, but what sort of things would be really helpful to kind of, um, I guess, encourage and support missionaries when they feel like they're not um, being effective, um, especially in the first few years when they're doing language learning, and that's the core of their training. Um, and yeah, it just looks different to what people expect.
Yeah. I think I think it's good to just keep encouraging and saying it's for a season and this is laying the foundation so that you can go on to be effective. Keep persevering. Um, it's the long term that's it's 10 years, it's 15 years, 20 years. You're going to be grateful for this foundation. So it's sort of helping them get over that. It feels so long at the beginning. That first 5 years is tough. Um, and you want, yeah, just stand in there, pray with them, support them. The power of a well-written email that just sort of encourages them and reminds them of a scripture about perseverance, that doesn't go astray. Um, yeah, listening to them and just talking with them and letting them speak. The first 2 years, it's really good just to have someone listen to you. Yeah. Okay, so Bible college versus secular, extra secular things. Um, I think you really need to start considering what kind of work you're going to do. If you're going to use your secular work to get in to a country, then you might need to be master's level or whatever, and that's important. And perhaps you should be, and we're getting more and more people doing this now, doing part-time Bible college so that there's no gap in your CV. So that's something you could easily, SMBC or other colleges now, they have week-long intensives. So that's one way you can do the whole semester's study in 1 week of lectures. That's a new development since COVID, really. So there are lots of different ways you can do it. Um, I think we would prefer people getting out earlier. So if you're going into an open access nation where you're going to be doing full-time Christian ministry work in terms of Bible studies and whatever, we'd prefer you got there. So, don't just keep climbing and climbing and climbing. Um, yeah. So these are the kind of questions that you really need to talk with your local mobilizer in your state. These are the kind of questions that we love to work with people and to consider your particular case. It's actually better to think about each person's particular case. And Christopher, were you the one from WA, Kununurra? Okay. So David Liao is really brilliant for talking about that. So talk with David and Sally. Um, yeah, yeah,
How can we be praying for you?
yeah. So my job at the moment, I'm the state leader for OMF, for New South Wales and ACT. Um, yeah, it's not the sort of job I ever imagined myself doing, but actually I'm quite enjoying it because it's so varied. But one of our things that we're trying to do, Rebecca and I would like to get into country areas, and we've tried various ways. So could you pray that we might get some invitations from some country areas so that we can do an area rather than just one-offs, different places? And we'd especially love to go into the ACT because I'm supposed to be the state leader of the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, but we haven't done any work down there in 4 years. So yeah, it would be just lovely. So that would be one thing. And then in my other work, I'm in the midst of publishing 2 books, so that's a little bit stressful at the moment. So my sword fighting book about how do you use your sword of the spirit to tackle Satan's lies is going into Chinese, and we are Laurie in Singapore is absolutely brilliant, but it's been a lot more work than we thought. So she's been changing and checking the translation. We are probably a week away from putting that out in traditional Chinese. I don't know how long it's going to take to switch it to simplified because it's possible that they use different terms. So that makes it a lot harder. Um, and then I'm also producing my 5th Old Testament novel, and it's with the proofreaders for 2 weeks. So, and just as I'm about to go to Cambodia, so I'm going to Cambodia to do the evangelism course that I do. And Simon, who's also an Aussie, well, he's British, but he's married to an Aussie. He and I are doing that course from the 20th to 24th of October. So that's the other thing. So 2 books, sword fighting nonfiction, and 1 novel, going to Cambodia, and just that we get some invitations into country areas and the ACT. Yep, that'll be fine.
Why don't I pray to wrap us up then? Dear Lord, thank you so much that we can gather together. Thank you that this Zoom has run fairly smoothly. Thank you that Christine was able to join us and share about her experiences. I thank you that you've appointed her to the New South Wales state leader position and that she is enjoying that. I pray that you would provide invitations to country areas where we can be sharing about mission and talking about equipping people for mission work, particularly in these rural regions and particularly in the ACT. I pray that we'd have more opportunities to visit and to do work there. I pray also for Christine as she works on publishing 2 books, the sword fighting translation and her 5th Old Testament novel. Thank you that these are in the final stages. I pray that this would run smoothly and that they'd be able to be published with very little need for further editing, that there would be no mistakes, and that these would reach the right people, that they would make an impact on the people that you wish. I pray also for her upcoming trip to Cambodia. Please give her a safe flight there, safe travels. Um, Please be with her as she runs the evangelism course with Simon. Please let this be a really good time of training that the people who are learning will be able to absorb as much as they can and put it to use in their own ministries. I pray that it would be encouraging for Christine to be able to share from the experience that you've given her. I pray that all of this work would bring glory to you, that she would seek to serve you wholeheartedly. I pray for all of us as well that we would be able to muse on what we've heard and learned tonight, that we would be seeking to serve you faithfully with what you've put before us and what you've equipped us with. I pray all of this in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Maybe just before they go, have they got a suggested person for next time or country? of the Aussies, feel free to give us a suggestion of someone you'd like to hear from or a country that you'd like to hear from. And we'll find someone in that country. Just throw it in the chat bar. Or someone new to the field. Yes, that's a good idea. Yep. You'll get these down, Rebecca.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
And
put
should we
people's
try,
names in a hat,
should we
lucky dip.
go for late November, folks? Or okay, let's go for late November. Yeah. We'll try and do one more this year, and we might go late January as well. We're sort of doing it in between our other, I know we've got an event next week in New South Wales, but anyway, we just wanted to get started. Yeah. Okay, feel free to head off.
Thank you, Christine, and thanks
Okay.
back.